it's good to stay alive, right? You don't want to die. So in the case of Colorado, you can fart and start a forest fire. So I roll over, I look like a walrus trying to hump off a rock. And I'm not exactly a set of car keys. I'm a pretty big dude. Because that thing leaked like the Iraqi Navy. The flint and steel, if you're going to be Jeremiah Johnson and start a fire with a flint and steel, I highly suggest you practice said task in multiple environments, starting with your backyard and some gasoline, because that ain't easy. My wife included, before we met, she got lost a couple times, and she can get lost in a phone booth. And I've done some pretty dumb things. I mean, I'm not going to church it up.
We strongly suggested that they call it the Gritty Film Tour. They opted for the Full Draw Film Tour, so...
Everybody makes mistakes.
Breakfast of champions, Snickers, and Diet Dr. Pepper. Come on, get a piece of it!
Why, yes, Brian, it is true.
That sounds terrible.
The days of our lives.
Hello, alright, you're listening to the Gritty Bowman, home of gritty bow hunting films, interviews, tall tales, and a wee bit of manly boasting.
I'm South Cox, and you're listening to The Gritty Bowman.
Hey, this is Corey Jacobson, and you're listening to The Gritty Bowman.
We born and raised outdoors, and you've been listening to The Gritty Bowman.
There you go.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Jordan.
And you're watching
The Gritty Bowman.
On this episode of Gritty Bowman, we travel to the Bowtech Factory Pro Shop in Eugene, Oregon to see the Get 'em Close elk hunting seminar put on by Jason Phelps of Phelps Game Calls and Aron Snyder of Kifaru International. We hope you enjoy the show.
If you like the show, please go to our website at grittybowman.com and subscribe to this podcast and tell your mates and pals about us. Do us a favour and please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on iTunes or on our YouTube channel. Send your questions and podcast ideas to grittybowman@gmail.com. If you're listening to this on iTunes, you can see the video version of this podcast on our website at www.grittybowman.com.
Red team, go.
Yep.
All right.
We're good. All right, we're good. All right, I'm Jason Phelps, the owner of Phelps Game Calls. I started in 2009 making the calls. I've been a die-hard elk hunter since 97 when bow hunting out in my area wasn't really popular. And at the time, I really had no way of knowing the internet wasn't as big as it was, so I was kind of self-taught. And we're going to go over some of the stuff that I do to be successful and some of the strategies that I use. And then accompanying me is...
I'm Aron Snyder. I work for Kifaru International as the chief designer. I was the founder of rockslide.com, which is a backpack hunting website. And I do a bunch of other stuff too, photography. I'm pretty much going to let Jason handle all the cool stuff. And then when I'm done, I'm just going to go over pack fitting, some different gear advice, nutritional advice, simple stuff like that for backpack hunting. And really, if you guys have questions above and beyond that, I'll answer whatever you have. But I think most guys here probably listen to Jason about how to call elk. So he's going to take it off, and then
and then I'll defer most of my gear questions to Aron. So a lot of guys wonder what makes a successful elk hunter. You can go. Some guys excel at something. I would say strategy and elk calling is my strong point. Fitness isn't my strong point. You have somebody like Aron who has the best gear, really physically fit, knows how to stay out there. Can run an animal down. But what I really, when you look at a successful elk hunter, somebody's usually pretty good at everything. They may excel at 2 or 3 things, but they've got, they've scouted. They know where elk are out there in a good area to start with. They're usually in pretty good physical condition. Is one of the things. But I've also seen guys that aren't in very good physical condition get it done year after year. They just change their strategies to tailor to that. You've got your gear, which we'll touch on in a little bit. You've got your elk calling, elk hunting knowledge, shooting, tracking, and then your archery setup. And what I kind of look at is I break it down into those 8 points, and at the end of every year, I kind of reevaluate where I was at. Did I call right? Did I have some setups that were completely goofed because of something I did? Was my gear good enough? And so I kind of grade myself at the end of the year. I'm my worst or best critic. I don't know what that which way it is. But I'm the most critical on myself, and was everything where it needed to be successful? Did I have gear failures? Do I need to be in better shape next year so I can get 2 ridges over? So I always, at the end of every year, go back, look at these things, and figure out where I can improve. Right now, this seminar is kind of timed goofy since you guys in Oregon have a week left and we've got 3 weeks left in Washington. But that's just kind of my basis for becoming a better elk hunter. Physical conditioning. This may be a spot where Aron lives at 6,000 feet. Yep. Trains up to 11, 12,000 feet. He comes to Washington, physical conditioning, he doesn't even need to worry about it. Whereas me being vice versa, I live at 300 foot sea level and I go and hunt at 8,000 or 9,000. And so I'm trying to train for that. And I'm trying to not only train to kill an elk, but what a lot of guys don't realize is once I kill that elk, the work is now started. I need to be able to not waste any meat. I need to be able to bone that elk out and get him out effectively. And then on top of that, I need to be able to be ready on the next day for my buddy or any of my other buddies that have a tag. So my goal is to be in the best physical shape as possible. I've been doing this mountain hunting for 7 years. I think in 2008 is when we started hunting the wilderness area there. Before that, I was a glorified road hunter that went and hunted timber patches around home. That's how I was raised. I decided somewhere along the way I wanted to change things up, and then that's kind of when physical conditioning was more important to me. And there's methods and means for everybody, and until you try all these different methods, you don't know if CrossFit is going to be what gets you in best shape. You don't know if it's going to be weightlifting with some cardio. Some of these guys run marathons or ultra marathons. Some of these guys do nothing, but it's up to you to kind of find out what works the best for you and what's the most effective for you. For me, hiking with a pack is easy on me. Running seems to tear me up, so I hate running. So I usually tend to hike with a heavy pack, try to get in shape. And then, for me, it's huge to eat well all year. If I eat like garbage, I'll weigh 300 pounds and can't get around in the mountains. So for me, I've learned over the years, I'm in pretty good shape. If I go on 2 hikes and eat well throughout the year, I'm usually good enough to go 10 to 14 days, and that's including packing 3 or 4 bulls out of wherever they end up. Aron trains all year. He kind of started the Mountain Warrior training this year, and they do a lot more strenuous hiking and stuff than I do, but they're also hunting, the mountains of Colorado.
It's different in Colorado. Well, not completely different, but I just got back from a sheep hunt in the Sangre de Cristos, for example. There was over 600 elk around us above 12,000 and just below 13,500 from the point where we shot the sheep at. Those elk don't travel down a whole lot. They're definitely hunting more of a trophy place than trophy animals. There is some 320, 330 type bulls in that area, but you're gaining 4,000 to 5,000 feet just to get there in 5 to 6 miles. So for the way that I prefer to hunt, I rely a lot heavier on physical ability. Not that you need that. As he had said, I've got friends in Colorado that shoot way bigger bulls than me. They don't train hardly at all. In fact, a lot of them give me crap about it. But if you're into backpack hunting and that's what or you're wanting to get into that, I would suggest, as Jason said, find your niche, walk your own path. But for me, at one time I was a really power lifter, bodybuilder, way bigger than I should be to mountain hunt. So for the last 8 years, I've been trying to lose as much muscle as I possibly can because it takes a lot of oxygen to make those muscles work. Now, chicks dig, I don't want a flat chest, I want to be able to bench press a lot, but I also don't want to, I don't want to be a stick figure, so trying to find a happy medium. Having said all of that, I had the guy that drew the sheep tag was the train to hunt, Works national champion last year, and he got his butt kicked. I mean, he got a sheep, but dragging tires and doing burpees and everything, I'm sure it certainly has helped him, but he'd never thrown 120 pounds on his back and hiked 5 miles off a mountain with a sheep. It just crushed him. And he did make it. He's a super tough guy, but he didn't really just throw a pack on and train all the time, where I'm not flipping tires over when I elk hunt. So I really focus on actually what I'm doing while I'm hunting. Like Monday, we'll do an 8-mile loop, 6-mile loop with 45 pounds, simulating hiking in. Tuesday, we maybe do 35 pounds and do not necessarily wind sprints, but intervals up the Tower Trail, which is where I'm at. Now, I have the benefit of living at 6,000 plus feet. So I try to break it up little by little. And then in the morning, I just do basically push-ups, sit-ups, lightweight bench press, things like that. I'm not trying to gain muscle. I'm trying to just maintain what I have. And I mean, we've got a muscle head over here. How are you? How does it affect you at all? Do you ever wish you had more or less muscle when you're heading in? Because I know you hit it hard.
Summertime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, I've always been a big guy, and in 2009, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna lose as much weight as I can, and I got down to like 215, and probably hadn't weighed that much in 6th grade. And 215 in 2009, and I headed off to the mountains, and I was so weak. Yeah. I mean, your legs turn to concrete. You don't want to take another step. Nothing's firing right. And so I learned right then, like, I need to be back to 230, 235. I might not look like, I'm ready to go, but I hunt way better at this 235 to 240 than I do at a lightweight. And so that's just kind of knowing your niche. I lift a little bit, I hike a little bit, I jog a little bit, and I just kind of know about where I need to be going into season. And that's kind of my niche. I always say be in as best physical shape as possible because it's never going to hurt you. And I'm too proud to let my buddies down to say, hey, I killed my bull on day 3, day 4. I need to take a break because my legs hurt, my back hurts. I want to be able to go give them everything that they gave me through day 3.
Yeah.
So that's.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you have something else on physical conditioning?
Nutrition, but you're probably going to go into that next. So.
Yeah, I mean, or we can touch it now. I don't go too heavy into. It's a broad topic. Do you want to cover it now, or
just quickly? I would figure, as far as your caloric intake, what keeps you from binge eating all your food in the beginning of the day is hugely important. It also, Jason's talked. There's a few different schools I went to in the military. Before I went to the school, maxed out my PT test, knocked out 100 push-ups, no problem. Got the crap kicked out of me for 2 months. I came back, I failed my PT test. I weighed 180 pounds. I looked like an avocado on a toothpick. I was super skinny. I had no muscle left. I burned every bit of muscle I had off during those, a couple different schools. It's no different when you're backpack hunting. Guys give me crap for taking so much food, but I never burn out. I'm as good on the 7th day as I am the 1st day. That has to do with training, but your training only goes so far. At a certain point, your caloric intake or your nutrition throughout the course of that hunt and each day, and your mental toughness play a huge part in it as well. And in my case, I eat like a horse. I mean, I eat all day long, 32 to 4,000 calories, as much as I can really pack. And if I'm only going 5 days, I pack even more food. Now, I'm not just packing Snickers there's a method behind the madness of the diet, but the idea being, you don't want to just go on a diet when you're heading out to hunt. You want to go out with a calculated plan for your nutrition. And for me, my wife's a dietitian, so it helps because I don't exactly know what the hell I'm doing. So she helps out with a lot of that with my diet plan in the beginning, but you want to mark each day. I would say put it in a 1-gallon Ziploc bag. Make sure there's 32 to 3,500 calories in that. And even if you get in there and the altitude, let's say, getting up into the higher altitude definitely can take your hunger away. Make yourself eat it anyway. Just because you're not necessarily hungry, you still want to try and your body still needs the nutrition from that. So I won't go into that too much more, but you definitely want to dial in your caloric intake per day when you're out there.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I do. I quit doing Mountain House. I spent $3,700 last year on Mountain House, so that'll make you stop doing anything, right? That's a lot. Plus the sodium in that. You ever watch Big Trouble in Little China where the Asian guy's hands swell up? That's what I look like after eating a Mountain House, because my sodium intake is super, super low. Because there's 3 different body types. One's kind of a muscle man naturally, the other guy's kind of a fat kid, and there's a super skinny guy like Matt over there. Well, for me, I have to keep my diet really dialed in or I get chubby really easy. Like he's in the same boat. Yeah. So my sodium, without talking all night about diet, nutrition, and salt, but salt is kind of bad and sugar is kind of bad unless it's natural sugar. So what I do is I take basically a stew, like I take a crock pot. I put about, for example, a 1/4 inch of olive oil. Olive oil has a high caloric intake. It also helps with the digestive system. Then I throw however much elk steak or elk, roast I want in there. But then I put spinach in there. I put a bunch of different nutritional, and then like brown rice pasta or brown rice, all of that together. This is the very shortened version. And then I put that in my food dehydrator, and I dehydrate that. That has a higher caloric intake than anything you could ever buy. You know what's in it, and you can live off of it. You're not going to live off most foods you bring into the backcountry. One, they're going to have, it's going to be hell and Jesus on your digestive system. You're not going to be going to the bathroom very correctly for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Where with this, you've got protein, your essential fats, you've got your carb, you've got everything you need in what I am building with that. Now, when I'm lazy or I'm poor, I just take any more top ramen. I don't use the seasoning packet. I use Mrs. Dash, which is like low sodium or no sodium seasoning. And I take an olive oil tuna packet. It costs like $3. It weighs less, has a higher caloric intake and higher protein value than a Mountain House. So that's what I do for the most part. I still throw some protein bars and stuff in there, but even that, you can get pretty creative with your protein bars. You can just take standard protein powder. You can make protein muffins. They're really easy. Like a lot of this I learned when I was doing the bodybuilding thing, but you don't necessarily have to be like a slave to REI, the mountaineering store, to Mountain House. If you put a little effort into it, you can pack 10 days, probably save about $400 and have really not take any kind of a nutritional dive while you're out there. And it does take a little bit of reinventing of the wheel, but it's not as bad as you think. And I can't boil eggs, right? I'm not a cook at all, but that's what's the glory of this is you just throw a bunch of stuff in the pot and then you dehydrate it. If it tastes good, you know that you did it right, write that down, do it again next time. If it tastes bad, don't do it again.
Yeah.
It's pretty, I literally do it like that.
Yeah, I make homemade spaghetti, throw it on the dehydrator. Couscous rehydrates really quick, really easy. Just instant mashed potatoes and shred some chicken. Put a Lipton pack of onion soup mix in. They're more filling, they're better for me, and I always feel better, making my own meals. But then I get lazy and end up buying 15 Mountain Houses before I take off. But if I have time, or if my wife has time, I love it if I can prep all my own meals.
Well, it seems like this is going good with he and I sharing this. So just on food alone, if you're with the economy today, most of us probably aren't overly wealthy. You can really cheat the system on backpacking food if you just read the label. So there's Idahoan potatoes is huge, right? They're, what are Idahoan? Like $1, right? 89 cents. They're not very expensive. But if you ever had shepherd's pie, well, you're just lacking like peas and corn and burger. Well, just take peas, corn, and burger, cook it, dehydrate it, put that in a Ziploc bag. When you get back there, make your Idahoan potatoes, throw that other stuff in there to the mixture you like, and it didn't cost really anything compared to like if you buy shepherd's pie or whatever that's called from Mountain House. One, it's killing you. Two, it's like $8, right? What I just made is like 35 cents. Now, it does require some discipline, but you can save a lot of money. So I've actually gotten, as weird as it is, the more money I make, the cheaper I get on food, but I've also kind of learned different things you can buy. And you can go to Fred Meyer, Walmart, read the labels. You'll learn real quick that it's not overly difficult to save quite a bit of money and actually eat healthier.
Yeah. Okay, and any other questions on, okay.
Can you elaborate on what is sugar?
Well, natural sugar. So processed sugar is the devil. It's bad. Just anything, pretty much, without going in another tangent and seeing another squirrel, pretty much anything you see in America today is bad. It's no crap. High fructose corn syrup, processed sugar, processed wheat. I'm not, when I was like huge, right, 280, bench pressing, whatever I wanted to, I couldn't walk from here to the cameraman. My joints always hurt, a lot of that because I was lifting heavy. But a lot of that is I was taking in so much gluten, so much sugar, so much processed sugar that I was killing my body. Now, I mean, guys, when I go backpack hunting, and I'm not trying to break my shoulder, pat myself on the back, I just am letting you know I feel better now cutting most of that crap out of my diet. Now, I eat the hell out of cookies. Like, I'm not perfect. I love cookies. But I found that, like, we went to Vitamin Cottage on the way here, and he was laughing at me. I got these peanut butter bars. Now, peanut butter is not, well, in moderation, is good for you. The peanut butter bar substitutes me cramming a Butterfinger down my mouth. I get some good fats from it, and it's a better alternative. And so anything with processed sugar, processed wheat, anything with gluten, pretty much anything when you go to the grocery store is bad. Literally is not great. So you really want to watch bananas, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries. Those are all good sugars. Snickers bars, bad. Cookies, bad. Donuts, that's bad. You don't eat any of that if you can help it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't. I just try not to.
Yeah. And one thing, I bring like peanut M&Ms. There's sometimes we talk about just forcing food down. That's something I look forward to eating to somewhere throughout the day, and it kind of helps. You know, so I don't cut everything out completely, but Snickers bars. I love almonds, Snickers bars, peanut M&Ms. I use that to kind of boost me or force me into eating it sometimes, because on day 5 or 6, when you're putting in 10 miles.
I was going to say that what I was talking about is general nutrition. You can eat pretty much whatever you want when you're burning 8,000 calories a day. It doesn't matter as much, but what I can say is if what you do 330 days a year does really reflect on what you do on that 30 days of hunting, 35 days of hunting, whatever you have. So yeah, Snickers bars when you're hunting, stuff like that, it's not that big of a deal. You just want to stop eating them when you get back from your trip. It's bad long term.
Yeah. I just remember a story eating the rest of my M&Ms on the way home. Whatever I got left in the box, you just throw it down. But going from physical conditioning and nutrition, we're going to touch on gear a little bit. And without getting too deep, just like physical conditioning, everybody's going to find their own niche, their own system that works for them. For the last 3 years, I've been using Sitka, and it's been great. Aaron's been using Cryptek. Now Aaron's using First Light, or whatever he wants to, basically. And I'm using a different gear set. You know, and I've shot a Elite bow before. Now I'm shooting a Bowtech. Aaron, so basically, there's a ton of great gear out there that works for you. Find what works for you, and go with it. I mean, the most important piece of gear I have for me that I found over the last few years is my boots. I mean, packs are important, tents are important, bows are important, but I've had some boot failures, some issues. So like that's been like my Achilles heel in trying to track down these last few years is like what boots are going to work for me. And unfortunately, boots are everybody's personal foot size, shape, volume is different, and so you can't really take anybody else's words for it. The only way to figure it out is to try a ton of boots on, hike in them, figure it out, and then stick with what works. And unfortunately, I had these boots 8 years ago. They worked great, were durable. For some reason, I felt like chasing these rabbits down all these holes. And after 8 years, I'm back to the same pair of boots. But that's one piece of gear that I really look at dialing in. Of course, I use Kifaru packs, which in my opinion, they're the best packs out there. And it's been a growing process. I knew Aaron back when I was running a Dana Designs Terraframe, but being a poor college kid with huge student loans and a young family, that was the best gear I could research and afford. And I wasn't going to let not having a Kifaru pack stop me from being 7-8 miles deep. So everybody needs to find their own gear. If you're a backpack hunter, you need to find a shelter that you can weather out a storm for 3 or 4 days. Or in our case, we just hike back to the truck. For most, it's not life or death. I'll just pack up soaking wet and end up at the truck.
I think what the most important thing is that I tell people, as far as your gear goes, and this is leaving brand loyalty. Pretend I don't work for Kifaru and pretend he uses an Osprey. Your boots are your boots are on your feet every day. You're walking to get where you're at. So don't ever skimp on boots. Like, don't buy the newest, coolest jacket and forget about your footwear, as he had said. Then the next thing I would say is your pack, because your pack is going to be on your back all the time. Now, you can suffer through anything, and you don't have to have that, but as far as what you're living with every day is going to be the most important. Now, you can go buy cheap merino wool, like -33 has sales all the time. You can find First Light merino wool on sale. Like Kuiu has like these 70% off things, I think. You buy all that stuff. So if you can get the cool factor out of your mind, which is difficult for me sometimes, as far as, well, I've gotten better now for whatever reason. Now that I get everything free, it doesn't matter to me that I match anymore. But before it mattered, and I would spend all this different money that I really didn't have on things I really didn't need. Like I would skip buying a $500, $400 sleeping bag, and I would go buy, got anybody from Bowtech listening? I would go buy a brand new bow, which I didn't really need, but I did need a new sleeping bag. So kind of prioritizing what you're doing by what you're living with each day is going to be, I feel, vastly important, especially on the comfort. I would say like the Dana Design Terraplane he's talking about is one of the best packs ever invented. I wish they still actually made it. It was a great pack. I don't know why they stopped. But if you look at like your footwear, guys will have, they'll get stuck between do I wear an all leather boot? Do I wear something like a Solomon Quest? Do I wear a mountaineering boot? And don't do what I did. I watched actually or read or something where South Cox was talking about his really soft footwear that he loves. That's not for me, right? That didn't work at all. My arches dropped. My feet started at 11. They're now at 12 because I had no arch support. Yeah, they were quiet and I didn't get blisters. And I thought, well, these boots fit great. I'm not getting blisters. Well, that wasn't the case. They're like a moccasin. They can't give you blisters. They're too soft. I just needed to find a boot that fit. So I'm not like Brian. Brian and I did a podcast the other day, and Brian was talking about he wears really soft footwear. That's fine. They're not going to work on a sheep hunt. You don't want to be in rough terrain on really soft boots. They fall apart. But just because of what fits him or me, without rambling on and on, I would say wear the boot that you feel is right for you and you feel comfortable, and don't worry what I'm wearing or anyone else is, because I got hung up in that pretty badly, and it screwed my feet up. Now I wear a mountaineering boot, even for elk hunting, everything but antelope. It's a really stiff boot, but that works best for me, mostly because I'm packing a lot of heavy loads, and just the way my foot is in general. What did you end up going to now?
Lower Tibet. I tried the Citadel Light and ended up back with the all leather boot.
Yeah.
It just fits my foot better and
yeah.
the waterproof. So yeah, boots are definitely important, and then packs, sleeping bags, tents, and then clothing is definitely important. Back when I used to hunt around home on my bike or walking areas, I bought my camo at Walmart. I'd go in, buy sweatpants or a pair of camo jeans and like I said, I used to be a poor college kid. I would buy the cotton shirts off the rack, and it didn't matter if I got wet. I would throw my Helly Hansen rain gear over top of it, ride around all day, and I'd get home and throw my gear in the dryer and be ready to go the next day. Now, not that it's life and death, like I said, I'm usually only 7 or 8 miles in. If things hit the fan and I need to get out of there, I just pack all my stuff up and leave. But now my gear is more important, because if I don't have gear that's going to dry out, or I know that I can sit in this gear for 2 days, but if I get that one glimpse of sun, I'm going to be able to air everything out and be able to continue hunting. Where that old camo gear, you literally could, it could force you off the mountain, because you're not going to be able to stay in all camo, all cotton gear. And so, your gear is important, but it doesn't need to be all name brand. It doesn't need to match. It doesn't need to be, specific camo. For instance, until I got my new pants, I've been rocking some Piranha Stretch Zions.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a $60 pant if you find them at the right place, and they are as good or better.
They're basically equivalent to a Kuiu Attack or a First Light Guide pant. They're made of nylon, without going into a big thing on now clothing. Polyester and spandex is decent for a pant for the material. Polyester holds more water. Spandex really holds water. But then the polyester doesn't breathe as well. When it gets heavy, it really stretches out. Nylon, it sheds water really well. It doesn't hold a lot of water. It breaks the wind really well. Well, Piranha Zions, Cool Renegades, the Kuiu Attack. Kuiu Attack's Torrier fabric, but it's basically the same thing, really close. And then the First Light Guide pant. All of those, I mean, you can find Piranha Zions for $60. That's what I wore on this last sheep hunt. I didn't have anybody making fun of me. I didn't have a camo company's pants, and Piranha's not anti-hunting, which is a bonus. So mine were olive kind of drab. They blended in fine, and they're great pants. So I would say if you research, you can email either one of us at any time, but you can get into some pretty nice clothing if you look hard enough for way less, considering I think my first bill when Kuiu sent me like a full set of stuff to test was like $6,800. Cryptics just sent me a bunch of stuff to test. It was $7,200, basically their full set. Now, it's easy for me to say this stuff is awesome from any company because I don't have to pay for any of it, but if I had to buy that, I could buy my daughter a car when she gets out of high school. So think about what you're doing, I guess, on that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, good gear is important, but there's also definitely some deal. Minus 33 up top, Piranha Stretch Zion. There's a way to get, Microtex. There's ways to get into some of this cheaper gear or high quality gear that's going to perform in the mountains without, spending huge amounts of money.
You just may not match.
Yeah, which I don't think the animals care.
Yeah.
And so, any other talk on gear you want to cover?
Why don't we, if you guys have any gear questions, we'll talk about them at the end. Otherwise,
instead of
we'll be
rambling
here
on, we'll get more
10
towards
o'clock at night.
strategy. Okay. I'll touch on what I do for shooting. Like I said, it's kind of, we're going to get into strategy here, which is really kind of the meat and potatoes of this. We'll talk about shooting and kind of how I approach hunting season. I do 95% of my shooting leading up to season in June and July. I get nervous. I get worried that, strings are going to stretch, that servings are going to wear out, something's going to go wrong at the wrong time. And so I do 99% of my shooting in June and July. And then August, when I go out and shoot, I basically, call them money shots. I'll go out and shoot 5 arrows max. I'll pick a random distance somewhere between 30 and 60 and, range find it and try to make that one perfect shot. That first shot, the next 4 or 5 high quality shots that I'm going to take. But to me, it's like I want that first shot. I'll shoot 4 to 5 times a week, shoot a broadhead. I want that first shot to matter. It's more important than those next 4 quality shots I'm going to take because we only typically get 1 shot out there. And so that's kind of how I approach shooting. I do a lot of shooting from February on, kind of getting field points and everything, but then as it gets closer to season, I'll shoot a lot in June and July, and then kind of really taper it off here in August. Like I haven't shot my bow for 3 or 4 days now, and I'll probably get home tomorrow, shoot 5 or 6 arrows and just try to make them really high quality, make sure I'm talking myself through it, anchoring, centering the pin, centering my bubble, and making high quality shots. Same if we have muzzleloader rifle hunters in here, it's your whole season. Everything we do, at least for me, it's like a year-round endeavor. I'm training, I'm studying, I'm learning, I'm getting new gear. It all comes down to the one shot, or you may get another one. But so for me, it's super important that I make that one shot count. And so that's kind of how I train leading into season. I don't do a whole lot of 3D. I know Aaron shoots a little more 3D. Getting ready for season, I'm usually either too busy or don't have the time. The other thing that, until last year, I don't remember shooting the last 5 or 6 bulls with the bow, except for last year. I don't remember. I don't know if I go full. I don't remember anything. I don't remember picking a yardage. I don't remember anchoring. I don't remember settling a pin. I don't remember squeezing the trigger. Last year I kind of switched things up and talked myself through it, wrote a little note on my riser, aim small, pick a spot, squeeze. And something clicked. I don't know why, but I settled everything down, anchored. At the time I remembered my bubble was way off, my pin guard was way out of center, and I was able to kind of settle down, anchor. And so there's no way when we're out there in the woods or practicing that you can prepare for the elevated heart rate. You can prepare for the mosquito that's biting you in the back of the neck, that you can prepare for the sweat in your eyes. There's all these other factors that don't really come into play until you've got a bull, screaming 10, 20 yards at your face. The adrenaline's kicked in and everything's been magnified as far as, you trying to pay attention and make that shot. So like I said, practicing a lot, through July, I think is kind of what pulled me through there. I didn't have to really think. It was all second nature. I'm sure I made, good shots, that I was anchored, that I leveled my bubble, that I picked the pin and I settled it. But at the time, I can't remember going through all those steps. So it's tough to train, for kind of what you feel out in the field, because there's no real way to replicate that in practice. The other thing I like to do leading into August, I'll make my 4 or 5 perfect shots. And I'll go out and just draw my bow and hold it. Can I hold that bow for a minute? Can I hold the bow for 2 minutes and then try to make a good shot? And I'm not trying to prove any points. I'm not trying to impress anybody. And if I need to, I'll back my poundage down. Hopefully I find out before August. But if I'm in June and July and realize that I can't hold my bow back for a minute or a minute and a half, I'm either gonna change the valley, move some string stops around, move the poundage down, or do something so that I'm more confident that when that bull comes in or hangs up before he makes another move, I can sit at full draw. So that's kind of my approach to shooting. I don't know how you approach, going into season, how much you practice, and kind of your setup when you switch to broadheads. And
I mean, I shoot all the time. The group that I train with, as far as physics, we also shoot together. And the biggest thing I would say is what's called a cold bore shot for a sniper. With a gun, do the same thing with a bow, except we do it at a very extreme distances, and we have a lot of money on the line when we do it. Well, it's the closest thing you can get to crapping your pants when there's an animal in front of you. If you're like, holy cow, this arrow's worth $400 between the group, it'll make you. So when you get under pressure, generally, from what I've seen, guys bury their nose in the string, makes you creep out of the bottom of the peep, which makes you shoot low. Guys will also, when they shoot, they peek. They grab their bow. Most right-handed guys fling it low left, so then they shoot low left and they want to see where it's at. Well, what was really amazing with this is when we were shooting these shots, we started filming guys shooting normally 20 minutes before we made the big bet. And then we put the film on them when they shot for the money. Completely different person. It was Jekyll and Hyde. The guy's death grip and his nose is buried in the string, just like complete pig nose, right? He's just muscling the crap out of it, and he'd miss the target. Well, that's the exact same thing as hunting. So for us, the way that we do it, there's some days we'll all show up at the range at one 80-yard shot, and that's all we get, and we'll put 20, 40, 50 bucks per person on it. Obviously, if you're poor, you're going to have to mow someone's lawn or figure a different way to do this, but this is the closest I've seen to simulating the heart rate, maybe not as much, but all the stupid mistakes you make. Like I've been in shoot down rounds at ASA tournaments, and I mean, I just fell apart, right? I was at my heart rate, I couldn't get it to calm down. I was doing stupid mistakes. I wasn't thinking correctly. I shoot a back tension relief. I mean, I literally was Pearl Harboring the crap out of that release, and I know better than all of that. And if I didn't have all that pressure on me, I wouldn't have been doing it. So I guess I'm just saying, find a way to mimic that. And the best thing I was ever taught to me was in one of my schools in the military. One of the instructors said, if you put a coffee cup down and I told you to drop a quarter in there every time, and I give you $5. Probably, you know, if I did it 50 times in a row or whatever the case may be. Well, if I told you I'd give you $1 million, you would be concentrating 1,000,000 times harder because you really need the money. It's $1 million. You're really focusing, and he's right. I'd be like micromanaging the crap out of that quarter. Every shot you execute out of your bow every time needs to have that much discipline. For me anyway, I feel that because you're practicing to take an animal's life. And so if you really concentrate on those things that much, I believe you'll become a lot better shot under pressure. And I know darn good and well he's never done any of that. He just flings arrows, right?
I'm a decent shot. I'm scared to death of target panic, so I don't get too worried about not hitting the perfect center. It's like it's always been good enough that I'm gonna hit within an inch at 40, or an inch at 30 yards or 2 inches at 30 yards. And so that's always been my approach. I'm confident in where I'm shooting and where I'm at, and I don't got to hit the 12 rings on 3D targets.
Right. No, and he's killed a ton of big animals. I just know that for guys that, let's say, that don't have ice in your veins, let's say, like some of these guys that train with us, they're new to hunting. You cannot mimic in any way the exact same thing as when an animal's in front of you. And I know last year, the one kid that shot his first elk, and it's like a 302 bull, it's a big bull, he told me it was second nature. It was like wiping your butt after you go to the bathroom, literally locking your car when you walk out. He had gambled so much money and he had practiced with it so much that it was automatic for him. I mean, the bull came in, it was 40 yards, it stopped broadside. He anchored nose across his string across his nose, corner of his mouth, and he said he remembered all so vividly, where the year before he missed like 3 elk and he couldn't remember anything. So whether it helped or not, I don't know, but he said it seemed to have helped him. So it definitely is more for simulating when you don't need to. He's got ice in his veins. He shot a ton of different animals. A little bit different scenario.
I still get a little worked up, but it's it's worked.
I know a lot of guys that they forget to look through the peep sight. I'll be like, dude, did you hit it? Yeah. Where'd you hit it? I don't know. Well, what happened? I don't think I looked through the peep. So it happens.
Yeah. So we're going to touch on scouting, even though I don't scout very much. The process of finding elk, making a hit list. I used to, when I hunted around home, there was a lot more pressure than some of the areas I hunt in the backcountry. And so my goal was to find as many herds of elk early in the season. Start in June. We did a ton of scouting around the 4th of July, and usually by the 4th of July around home, industrial logging country in Southwest Washington, I kind of had and knew what bulls were around, where they were at. And as the season approached and the horn growth stopped, we started basically putting together a hit list. And it didn't always go top to bottom, big bull. We would look at things like pressure. Am I 5 miles in on a bike, in an area that has one clear cut, nobody else is going to be back in here? Am I, 1 mile from a gate and I've seen 50 people in here scouting, even though this is the biggest bull? Am I 20 miles deep and we've got, a small bull, but I know there's not going to be any pressure? So for me, I kind of, the engineer in me tries to lay out this big spreadsheet and look at, I've got people, I've got pressure, I've got a big bull, and try to put together a plan on what I want to go after. Now, I don't do a whole lot of scouting besides Google Earth. I sit at my computer and try to figure out where elk are at, which I've proven on the ground as well. I've looked at spots, went and showed up, found elk, and so I've kind of got some history and know what to look for and can usually find elk. Everybody goes into elk season with a goal. Is your goal to kill any legal bull? Is your goal to kill a cow? Are you only killing herd bulls? Or are you willing to kill, any mature satellite bulls? And everybody's got their own system or what they're after. For me, my personal goal is to put myself in a position with big bulls. So I may, find a spot that I've scouted, found a big bull, but I usually typically shoot the first mature, semi-mature bull that comes in, and that's just always been the big bulls that I have shot have been because I've put myself in those areas, and they happen to come in first. We've talked about this on the way up here. If I'm pretty lucky on some of these big bulls, because if a semi-mature bull would have came in first, I probably wouldn't have had a chance at the big bulls. And then I've got rafters full of small bulls as well that, using aggressive strategies, these small bulls, I broke satellite bulls off, they've come in and I haven't been too picky. So everybody has certain goals in mind, and so going after the biggest bull isn't necessarily what's important. Or if filling your freezer is more important, then basically I would probably put myself in an area with the most amount of elk. And so everybody's going to kind of formulate their own plan where they're going to hunt and kind of how they're going to go about their hunt. For me, being strictly trying to call elk in, and that's kind of my goal, is I want to be in unpressured areas, whether that's 1 mile from a gate, whether that's 20 miles deep on a trail or wilderness, whether I've got to get on my bike and ride 15 miles into an area. My goal, for calling elk in is to put myself in a spot where the pressure is very, very low and the elk haven't been bothered. He had asked a question earlier about overcalling, and I found that it's exponentially easier to call bulls in that have not been touched, haven't heard a sound, aren't expecting you to be an elk. So that's kind of my other thing is, unpressured elk are easier to call in, which are easier for me to kill. As I'm scouting, elk need 3 things to live, which they need food, they need water, they need cover/bedding. And so as I'm scouting, I'm trying to, not only, I'm looking for old rubs, I'm looking for tracks, I'm looking for all of this, and then also trying to keep in mind, these elk need to eat somewhere, which if you're around here, you've got clear cuts, south slopes. If you're in the mountains, you've got alpine, you've got timbered basins with feed on the south slopes. And then a lot of times I'm looking for an area with, bedding not very far over the ridge on the north slope within, water around. If I'm scouting a new area, a lot of times I'm not so concerned about finding elk. I'm looking for rubs, I'm looking for, past used bedding areas, wallows, stuff like that. I don't really need, as long as elk are in the area, I'm not necessarily looking to find elk that day if you're doing some of those June and July scouting trips before elk, if you're in an area that has migratory elk. So that's kind of one of my approaches is find rubs, because that's a really good indicator, and I've been able to prove it multiple times that by going back into that area, I'm usually going to get into elk come September. Do you have anything to add on scouting, or you're in the woods all the time?
Yeah, it's different for me. I'm in the woods a couple hundred days a year, or 150 for sure, but in Colorado, the elk feed at tree line 13,000 feet, 12,000 feet in the summer. As time goes on, some of them break off and go down. What I would say is I've hunted almost every state in the U.S. that holds elk, and it is different in every one. There's nothing the same. I hunted North Idaho, which is basically like hunting Panama. It was triple canopy rainforest, pissed rain every day. It was horrible. Can't see anything. I don't even know why I brought binoculars, and I certainly didn't need 7 pins in my sight because I couldn't see more than 20 yards. Then I went and I hunted New Mexico, I could have used 14 pins on my site because I could see everywhere, and I was hunting pinyon, junipers, and areas that I'd never even hunted before. And then obviously, if in Colorado, there's some areas, if I draw a tag, I'm hunting in the timber, binoculars aren't overly important. And then like when I hunt over the counter areas, which are heavily pressured, I'm relying a lot more on my optics and physical ability than I am on preseason scouting, because I know the elk are there. There's so many elk in Colorado, they're pretty much everywhere. So I'll be able to see them feeding above tree line if I know there's elk in that general area. So I'm not really pinpointing necessarily a wallow or anything else. I'm just pinpointing a large group of elk that are feeding. It's super simple. I don't kill a lot of giant elk. We were talking about that. I've killed 3 bulls that are over 330. 2 of them were completely blind luck, and I just happened to run into them on the way to shooting a smaller bull. I'm a horrible trophy hunter, but I am very good at killing a lot of elk or helping my friends. And a lot of that is just sheer numbers. And as he said, I don't even have to scout anymore because it's just that there's a lot of elk in Colorado. But I would say that don't take like my advice on Colorado if you're going to hunt northern Idaho or western Oregon. Like I used to live here, like I said, and I hunted in western Washington. My gear, my optics, my everything that worked in Colorado, I about died out here. I got pissed on in rain. It was horrible, and I didn't know where any elk were, so it took a little bit to get used to it. It's just different terrain.
Yeah, we hunted Idaho for the first year last year, and we didn't have any time to do any scouting. I've actually had scouting kind of screw me up a little bit. You get bulls on trail cameras, you put all your time into one area. In 2008, for instance, I had located a 350-inch Cascade Roosevelt, and me and my buddy watched him every single day of the summer, the weekends, and we watched him, and we climbed up in there, packed our food in the weekend before, hung it in a tree. He was there, came back in, hunting season, we hunted for 10 days and we could not find that bull. And he was in the same spot all summer. Come to find out, he had moved down the ridge and over 1.5 miles. Now, if I hadn't been so laser focused on this area he had spent the whole time, I would have probably explored where he was at. And so scouting's actually hurt me. And then when I go to North Idaho, I just know there's elk in the area, and without sounding overconfident, I'm gonna find them. I'm going to run the ridge top, I'm going to run the creek bottoms, I'm going to run mid slope, and if there's elk in the area, I can find a track, I can follow the track, I'm eventually going to figure out where these things are at. So that's kind of why I don't, besides being busy making calls for you guys all summer long or whoever buys, it's like I've only got so much time, so I don't get a whole lot of time to do scouting. I'm just kind of relying on my ability, hopefully, when I get there to track these things down.
This is a little bit...
And play, and the one thing about when I get there is that information that I do get when I'm there is, current information. I'm not going on where I had a trail cam picture 4 weeks ago because I don't know if that bull's still in the area.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that's a little bit off the subject, but the same, I know guys that they head to Colorado for preseason scout, and maybe they just want to get away from their wives, right? Like they're leaving really early to go scouting, and when they get there, let's say it's in late July, that's 4 weeks before season starts. They spent $400 on fuel if they're driving, from back east a little ways. In reality, in my opinion, they would be better off not driving out here, work out a hell of a lot more, get more physically fit, and then get as much info they can, Google Earth, the whole 9 yards, forums, whatever you can get it from. But scouting 4 weeks ahead of schedule before the season starts compared to upping your physical fitness level 30 to 40%, the guy that's 30 to 40% more fit, he's going to run the elk down and he's going to find them. He'll find where they're at, where a guy that goes out there and poops out in 3 or 4 days because he can't find elk, he's obviously not going to find them because his butt is driving home. So it does sometimes heading, and I've been fortunate enough to do some, over-the-counter type tags, and like, I can just drive out there and go, and much like Jason, I'm fit enough to where I'll eventually find them, where if I would have drove out there ahead of time, I really would have just, pissed away a bunch of money I could spend on gear or another hunt. So the fitness thing for finding them, I think, is pretty important too.
Yeah, or if you're tired and beat down and need to take a nap, or you're wore out. Like a lot of times that's when we use, a lot of guys will take a nap. I use 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the evening. That's my 6 hours to run ridges, find elk, find sign, and so, if I'm physically wore down when I should be doing that, I'm definitely hurting my chances, and, it's an opportunity I'm losing to find elk to hunt on that hunt. So now let's move into the funner stuff. We're all past scouting and it's hunting season, and we're gonna, this is my strategy, and like I had said earlier in the question and answers, it's not the only way. It's just the way that I do it, and it's pretty exciting, to have bulls trying to rip your head off coming in on a line. So it's opening day. It's time to locate a bull. It sounds like if you're in Aron's shoes, you're sitting on a ridge top and you're just going to see him when it gets daylight. Where I hunt, Western Washington, Western Oregon, Northern Idaho, I can't see 10 feet in front of my face. I'm relying on, maybe I've got a vantage point where I've got some small pockets I can see, but then I typically go into locating audibly with a locator bugle. So we'll get into some of the calls I use later, but I use the audible method. And one thing, if you guys take any nuggets away, if you're not too tired, one of the ways a lot of guys will say, man, we hear bulls bugling all night, or maybe we haven't found a bull. Locating bulls at night is not necessarily fail-proof, but if they're there, you'll find them at night. Regardless of the moon phase, regardless of what's going on, if you can spare 2 more hours of sleep, if you're just flat struggling to find elk, I highly suggest you go out and locate at night. You're going to be amazed at what you hear. And I'll use a little example of a bull I shot in 2011. I shot him, not that it matters, it was a frontal shot. He went down in a Christmas tree patch over our head. I couldn't see him, and he ended up expiring. And we were three miles in on our bikes. I told him we didn't have our game bags or bike trailers or anything. I sent my buddy back out, and it got dark on me as I was sitting there with the bull. I didn't start breaking him down or anything. And we had hunted this canyon all day the day before, and we had heard the one bull in the herd that I ended up killing mine out of. And like, man, this canyon is dead. It's a huge drainage up in the commercial Weyerhaeuser land that we hunted there. And I was like, man, this place should have way more elk than this historically. And as I was sitting there with that bull, it got dark, and you hear one pipe off across the canyon. I had my bugle, and I let out just a real high note locator bugle, and all of a sudden another one bugled, and then that one got another one to bugle, and another one bugled. And the same canyons I had called in the night before, like not during the daylight, but that night, evening hunt, that morning hunt, and then I ended up killing my bull on a night hunt. I hadn't heard a bull bugle in that canyon all night. By the time I was done and my buddies got back in, was pretty sure there was over 10 bulls bugling within probably a square mile of where I was at. A bull that I had never, and they were there the whole time. I just wasn't unable to hear them. So by locating at night and bugling at night, or just staying out at night, I didn't even have to bugle. They just kind of started their own little symphony. But locating at night is a great tool if you don't need to sleep. Another way to locate a bull I'll touch on real quick is still hunting, which I don't have a clue who came up with that dumb name for hunting, because still hunting means basically walking slowly through the timber, which isn't very still. But that's another way. We've got some areas that we know are bedding areas that there are typically always elk in. We'll still hunt through an area, but typically I reserve that for late in the season, because if I blow them out of their bedding area, I may not get another chance at that bull. So that's kind of like a last resort. And then a lot of times after we locate, rather than try to call them to me, I try to get in front of them and ambush them, and then call them in as kind of a call and ambush setup. So that's kind of the ways that I locate bulls and kind of go at them. And then, if I've got the ability to do it visually, I'd prefer for them not to know that I'm on my way, to set up on them. So if I can glass them, that's my preferred method, and then get in front of them and then start the calling strategy.
Same thing. No, it's
just locate what.
Yeah, I would Colorado. The biggest thing that I've noticed there is just your ability to glass them, and you can hunt significantly later in the day if you've glassed them above tree line, because for the most part they're not going to just head in there like 100 yards and lay down. They're going to go a little bit deeper. So even if that's your general strategy of locating them is glassing them, if you have the ability, you can actually get over and just park your butt right in the edge of the wood line. They're probably going to come right back in the same day, but the optics is a lot bigger in Colorado. Actually, in New Mexico and Arizona, areas that I've hunted or guided as well, optics were as important, in calling at night. Yeah. I think everybody should call at night. It works everywhere, no matter what.
And to elaborate on that, I don't mean go in and try to call a bull in at night, because it's going to be useless. Yeah. And you may call just a locator bugle, and then it's really tough to do. And I'm going to talk about some of the biggest, in my opinion, some of the biggest issues people have with calling elk in. But do not call them in. Like just one simple locator bugle, know that they're there, and then leave them alone. A lot of guys will get hung up on, it does you no good to call a bull in at night, because you just screwed everything up for tomorrow. So when I mean call at night, like one locator bugle, if you don't hear anything, walk 300 yards and do it again, but don't necessarily, once you get one to answer, you're done. You basically walk back to camp and go to bed, or go back to your truck, or shut your car door and drive off, whatever you're doing if you're driving around locating. But I'm not even above driving around and locating at night because it's really effective. There could be bulls, less than a mile away from the road, and I'll just drive down the road, shut my rig off, sit for 5 minutes, and then bugle. Or roll my window down so I don't even got to open my door or shut my door. We were getting real technical in road hunting 101 here, but
I was to say, though, just talking about over-the-counter public land and compared to an area where I actually can shoot big elk, that I draw is it's a road hunting area and there's huge elk there. We bugle right out of the truck window. I mean, we literally, my buddy, just in case we don't remember, he'll come out and he'll lay a log in the road so we know where it was the next day, and we will locate it. Now, it takes 3 years to draw this unit. I will say we've been stupid enough in the morning to hike into where we heard it from a couple times, and my buddy's like, hey, locate it. Well, we located it. We located about from me to Brian. It was right beside us, and we didn't know, and we screwed it all up because it wasn't daylight yet. And I bugled, and it ran right over. So it does work really well. And out of the truck, I think if you wait the few minutes, they're used to elk bugling right on the road. They're by it anyway, so I've never had any issue with it.
Yeah, so we'll get into, all right, you've located a bull and kind of the pre-setup. I've joked with some of my buddies, they say that I overthink, or being the engineer, I over-engineer kind of my pre-setup. But once I've located some elk, I like to ask myself some questions. And they're not real deep questions. They can all be answered in about 10 or 20 seconds. But
this podcast has been broken into multiple parts to make the downloads faster. You have reached the end of a part, but not the end of the complete podcast. So please check your Gritty Bowman library for the next part of this podcast.
Bollocks.